Welcome to the Golden Keys. I'm your host, Trent Zimmer, alongside my beautiful wife, Karissa. We delve into the fascinating world of life in Minnesota, parenting, entrepreneurship, and real estate. We are passionate learners, and we love to share the lessons, knowledge, and experiences with you. Whether you're a parent looking for community, an entrepreneur seeking inspiration and guidance, or a real estate enthusiast looking to stay up to date with the latest trends and developments, the Golden Keys has something for you. Join us as we share insights, stories, and wisdom on this engaging and informative show. So sit back, enjoy the show, and let's go open some doors. All right, beautiful. We have Kyle Kovats on here. Kyle is a relationship that came to me through my 30 Under 30 chapter, which, Kyle, I think we met in Charleston.
I believe Charleston. Yes. Well, I was there. It was either Charleston or, as we talked about, the years get mixed up, the places get mixed up. I believe it was Charleston 2018. I want to say was the year.
Yeah, they do.
That's about right.
It was 2018. Yep. That was the year that I made it. What chapter what year were you?
I was 2016.
2016. Okay, so you were the same as Harrison.
Yes.
Okay.
Same class.
Yeah. We just had Harrison Beecher on a conversation yesterday. So we'll release that one at some point too. So really quick. So we try to keep these 30 minutes. Who's Kyle Kovats?
Yeah. So brief background on me. My grandfather owned a pre-licensed real estate school in New Jersey. So growing up, it kind of, I guess, piqued my interest. And once I graduated high school, got my license right away, did real estate rentals pretty much for just the first 2 years of me being in the business. I would do those part-time in Hoboken. I went to college at Rutgers, which was about 40 minutes away from Hoboken. I would drive up, try to do like 1 to 2 rentals a week, make anywhere between, let's say, $500 to $1,000 a week, with the thought process of trying to graduate college, which is little student loan debt as possible, with the thought in mind that I'd want to invest in real estate. And when I invested in real estate, I knew I needed some money to do so, at least. And that's how I got started. Then, once I graduated college, full-time real estate sales. So from 2013 to 2016, I would sell anywhere between about 10 million to 16, 17 million worth of homes a year as a solo agent. So I didn't have a team or anything, which allowed me to really save up money. And at the time, I was living home with my mom. So I wasn't paying rent or anything like that. And that, definitely helped me save up a lot of money as well. And really what I just started doing during that time was just beginning to invest in real estate. 2 to 4 families, subdivisions, flips, even an Airbnb investment. And then I started passively investing into like large apartment complexes through a syndicate structure. And then up until today, what I do today mostly is on the general partner side, where me and a couple partners will buy an apartment complex and then syndicate shares out to investors, and they come on as limited partners. But that's the quick little overview of who I am and, how I got to where I am today.
Yeah.
I know you as Kyle, the guy who's like the syndication guy.
Yeah.
But I think we all forget that there was a time when Kyle was living with his mom. And you know what?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Maybe the first thing you should be teaching at your real estate school is move in with your mom. Because I lived with my mom, and I credit being able to get off the ground to that same thing too. So living with your mom is where it's at.
Living with your mom is hugely beneficial because, laundry, you get cooked for,
Meal.
you get cleaned for, no rent. You could save up a lot of money.
That's awesome.
So when you, sorry, you were going to ask a question, but you started talking about when you first got started, you were in rentals. Were you helping people rent properties, or were you helping people acquire rental properties?
Yeah, I was helping people rent properties. Now, it might be different around the country, but in New Jersey, the way that it works, the tenant pays a 1-month broker's fee. And the area in which I was doing rentals is Hoboken, which is right outside Manhattan. So the rentals were really, really high, and they still are really, really high. So you could actually make like decent money doing rentals. So if I rented, your standard kind of tenants would be like 23-year-old guys or girls who just graduated college looking to rent a place. And if I rented them a 3-bedroom for $3,500, if I double ended that deal, based on my commission split, I would make like $2,700 on that.
Nice.
If I didn't double end that deal, I'd make about half of that. I make about $1,300. So for me, being a teenager at the time in college and just, trying to pay my way through college and, pay my off-campus rent and things like that, it was really beneficial, number one. And number two, for the future purposes, it helped me on the leasing side for like our investment properties, understanding what tenants want to see, what they like the most, what their biggest concerns are. But yeah, that's how I started. I really exclusively just did rentals when I first started off.
Crazy. What were you going to
That's
ask?
awesome.
You were going to ask something.
I was just going to ask what your first investment property was.
I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah. So my first investment property was, it was kind of a mistake investment property. So a mistake in the sense that I was renting, well, at the time I was still living with my mom, but I knew I wanted to buy an investment property to rent out. And at the time I lived in North Jersey with my mom, which was about a half hour out of Hoboken. And Hoboken, Manhattan is the area that kids our age after college go out in
Yep.
on the weekends, I should say.
Mhm.
And the problem is if you and your friends go out there, you might go out all night, go to, a Rangers game, and then afterwards go to the bar, hang out with your friends, have some drinks. And then, we're not driving in. This is before like we even had Ubers, right? And it makes me sound old to say this is before there was even Uber, but it really was before there was even Uber. So we would have to get like yellow cabs and get them back to the suburbs. And
if
it
you
was
were
quite
lucky.
expensive. Yeah, if we could find one, right? And if
Yeah.
one was willing to leave Manhattan to drive
Yeah.
to the New Jersey suburbs, which is a totally different story. But so anyway, I said it would be nice if we could all just get a hotel room and just stay here for the night. But the hotels were so expensive. The only one in Hoboken was the W at the time. And the W was like $500 a night. And we were too cheap to pay that. So I said, it'd be great if there were some other options. And I said, what would probably be really beneficial would be like an Airbnb here.
Mhm.
So I bought
Hold
a
on.
studio.
What year is this?
This is 2014. 2014.
Nice.
So
you beat the Airbnb craziness.
Yeah. So I bought a studio, and this was when Airbnb was in like its infancy. And I bought the studio, I put it on Airbnb, and I put it down for like $200 a night. And it was getting rented like wildfire, like crazy. I mean, I had one tenant who was actually a summer intern one summer at Goldman Sachs in the city, and he rented it for the entire summer from early June until late August. No, so I gave him a long-term discount fee, but the long-term discount fee, what it worked out to be was $4,500 a month. And the normal rental on that at that time would have been like $2,000 a month. So I was like, this is great. This is awesome. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's how it kind of started off. And then as time went on, I started realizing with the Airbnb that I was doing it the wrong way. I was self-managing it. So when you self-manage an Airbnb, you're a lot of things. So, you're dealing with the bookings, communicating with the tenant, dealing with any issues that pop up. But it's also time consuming because when they move out, they might leave and vacate at 11 a.m. and somebody else is moving in at 4 p.m. And I got to get in there in that 5-hour window, clean it all up, wash the sheets, change the sheets, everything like that, and hope they didn't wreck the place in the meantime as well. That's the other caveat. So, and then, one New Year's Eve, the person wrecked the place. And I was like, what, all these investments I keep doing, whether it was the Airbnbs, the subdivisions, the flips, it was a lot of time consuming stuff. And, that's when I decided, I wanted to do something a little more hands off. And that's when I started investing around like 2015, 2016, passively into the syndicates at that time. But yeah, my first investment was very simple. It was a studio apartment that I just threw on Airbnb and honestly had no clue what I was doing and just said, what, worst comes to worst, the monthly payment on this, principal, interest, tax, and insurance was about $2,000. If I even rented it for 1/3 of the time, 10 nights out of the 30 nights, I'll break even. And if I don't, I could just plug a long-term tenant in place who would cover that anyway. So, my number one piece of advice for anybody who's looking at Airbnb, because, Trent, as you said, they're getting really, really popular right now, obviously, and more people are doing them. My number one piece of advice, don't do one unless, the monthly expense on it can be covered by a long-term tenant. Because if not, you're really doing it from a speculative standpoint.
Sure.
Yeah, totally. That's the same thing I tell people.
Yeah.
Too, and actually we're seeing the cool part is your safety net is sort of the midterm rental now is becoming popular, which is almost becoming better than the short term.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right? It's like less turnover, less work. Rents are still strong, but they're just not as risky.
Well, who you're marketing to is a different pool of people, right? They're usually young professionals or like a traveling nurse or someone who's there for a very short amount of time. It's not a family that's coming to enjoy your property for vacation and at the home pretty much the entire duration of their stay, which could mean they're trashing it or something goes wrong or they accidentally dye the sheets with some other thing. Like, there's more risk.
Yeah.
So
then all of a sudden you have, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, because there's probably a lot of things that happen in between, but Kovats multifamily, which mostly invests in, I have Dallas and Houston, 200 to 300 unit buildings. How in the world do you go from a place to shack up after the Rangers game to And it's not like you're a passive, you're not a limited partner in these, you're running these. So where did you get the knowledge to go from such a small, weird thing that, let's be honest, you probably felt like you didn't deserve anyways, but you just did
Yeah.
it, to running these massive investments where you're raising how many millions?
Yeah. So last deal we raised 27 million on that one.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
you bought that Airbnb in 2014. So we're not even
Yeah.
10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going from a small Airbnb studio to hundreds of units. It's crazy.
Yeah.
To me, it's just nuts.
Yeah. So to give you a background on that, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to say, was that like New Year's Eve with the Airbnb. Now, at the time that happened, I was also doing some flips. I was in the middle of applying for a subdivision on a property as well. And, all these different things that I was doing, I was making good money on doing those things. And they're things that I don't regret doing one bit. And, if I had those deals fall in my lap again, like subdivisions, like flips that are absolutely home runs, like you can't lose on them, I would still do them. But I wanted to kind of leverage some of my money now for my time, because I had made good money selling houses. I made good money, doing Airbnb and then selling that property, doing flips, doing subdivisions, 2 to 4 family stuff like that. But the way that I saw it is, I read a bunch of books, and a lot of the books that I would read, kind of studying some of the wealthy people in the world, is that they like to trade their money in return for time. So I said to myself, I really like the fundamentals of real estate investing. There's some markets I really like. How can I invest in these markets? Just kind of hand my money off, but I don't want to do any work. And that started with me around 2015, coming across syndicates. And when I came across syndicates, I was just going on, I went on Google. I literally Googled this, how to invest in real estate without doing any work. I saw,
Hold on a second. I think this is so good because this is a guy that's to the consumer, right? Experienced, you know what you're doing, but you went to Google for the answer.
Yeah, I just Googled it. So, and what comes up is the typical stuff, like, the sponsored stuff from like REITs. There's REITs that want you to put your money into their REITs and stuff like that. Then I saw the thing called, syndicates. And I came across a podcast, and this podcast was just interviewing syndicators. And in my head, I was like, what the hell is a syndicator? I don't even know what that means. So I looked it up, and I saw basically what it meant is a large partnership. It's somebody going out, trying to find, in my case, what I was looking for was apartment complexes. They were going out, they were finding apartment complexes, they were buying them, but they weren't just buying them by themselves. This person, along with maybe 2 or 3 other partners, would go out and they would first find the deal. They'd post the money up front for the earnest money deposit. They would post the money for the due diligence, inspections, and all that kind of stuff. And then after everything checks out, they would raise money from limited partners like myself, and then buy the deal. So I started going to events. I went to the first event I ever went to was in Vegas. I came across this on like a Sunday. The event in Vegas was on Friday. I was on a plane in 4 days. I was out there. I was at the event, and I was like, I need to learn about this stuff. So I go to this event. They're interviewing all these syndicators and stuff like this. And while I'm at this event, there's people there. They're like, hey, in 2 weeks, there's this other event in Dallas that's going to have a lot more people. You should go to it. Right from that table at lunch, I literally booked the flight to Dallas for in 2 weeks. I'm going to go to Dallas now on a weekend. I'm going to do this weekend event. I'm going to meet tons of people. Right. So that event had 600 people. Now at these events, I would just ask people, who's somebody you recently invested with and what do your returns look like? I'm curious, what you've been able to get. And I would try to find people who weren't doing deals themselves at that point, so I could really get a different perspective rather than someone just saying they're all great, right? So I would find people, and I met with this guy, Charles was his name, Charles Lemaire. And he's like, yeah, this is my, portfolio. I've invested in 70 different deals. Here's my average returns. This guy had a sheet on him that said it. And he wasn't even looking to raise money or anything. He was literally just there to talk to other prospective passive investors, not to raise money, just because he was an interesting guy. And he wanted to, I guess, explain, to others what he's doing and why it works. So I look at this, I get on some people's lists. Then I passively invest into one of these syndicates. It was a 300-something unit apartment complex down in San Antonio. This is late 2015, early 2016. And the cash flow starts coming in. So I invested $100,000 into that deal. And back then, this is when, when you invested into a deal, you were getting like 9% cash flow annually. Now it's closer to like 6% because, interest rates have gone up and therefore returns have gone down and stuff like that. And prices have gone up, obviously, too. Yeah. So that first year in that deal, I got like $8,500. I invested $100,000 into it and I got like $8,500 back in just, I called it mailbox money. They would do literal, physical checks. It wasn't even direct deposit. I would get checks in the mail. I'd just be like, this is cool. I'm not doing any work. My money's really working for me. Then I passively invested in about 20 other deals roughly prior to late 2018. In late 2018, I had started talking to people because that's, the tax thing, like the tax reform was passed in September of 2017 and the tax benefits like exploded. And I remember giving my accountant in it was around like March of 2018, my what's called K1s that you get on these tax documents. And my K1s showed like big loss positions. And I say that with air quotes because the losses were just paper losses. They weren't actual losses. So he's like, wow, you have a lot of tax deductions. And I had gone from paying, 6 figures in income taxes annually. And I was always mad about that. And he's like, this year you don't even owe anything. And I was like, how? I was like, this is the most money I've ever actually made. And he was like, long story short, he's like, you're a full-time real estate professional. You get these tax deductions and all this. We use the deductions against your income. And if you weren't a real estate professional, we'd be able to use it against other things. But I don't know all the language he uses, and I'm not going to try to get into it right now because I'm not a tax professional. But he was like, yeah. So I started just talking to other realtors about this. I was like, hey, because the realtors I looked up to in our area who were like older than me, had more experience than me and things like that, I just assumed that maybe I didn't know about this and they all knew about this. I just started like talking to them. We'd be doing deals together. It was around tax season. And I'd be like, hey, tax season's here. I'm sure you got a bunch of deductions. You have investment properties, right? And they'd be like, no, actually. And I'd be like, interesting. So I would talk to more and more realtors I would find out none of them owned investment properties. And I said to them, I said, look, you guys should look into like investing in some real estate, whether you buy it yourself or whether you invest passively into like a syndicate. These deals provide good income, good appreciation for wealth building, obviously. And then, some decent things on the tax side as well. So long story short, they all started contacting me and saying, hey, you're investing in these deals. Can you send some of them to us? We want to invest in these deals. And it was at that time where I basically said to myself, you know what? I've done so many of these deals passively. Every single month, I get monthly reports from the deal sponsors who are putting together those deals with the financials, with the rent rolls, with the T12s, with the balance sheets and everything like that, the income statements, and they're giving me a summary on these. And when I have questions, I ask questions. They answer the questions. When things go bad, I see what goes bad. When things go well, I see what goes well. I said, I think I've actually kind of gained a lot of experience on. Yes, it was on my own dime, but it was on somebody else's name. Because, the way that I view this is I would never, ever want to myself ask somebody for money unless I was completely and totally positive about things, which really, I guess, kind of delayed me doing these deals myself. And it was at that time in late 2018 where we bought our first complex. We went under contract on it, 120 unit property in Phoenix. We wound up closing in February of 2019 on that one. So it was a 120 unit complex. Glendale, technically, which is we're on West Bethany Road, which is down the street from where the Arizona Cardinals play. And we bought that for 11.6 million. And we actually just sold it in November for 25 million. So we made a lot of money on that deal. And our investors, as an example, so $100,000 investor had their 100 turned into 355 over just about 3.5 years. And I always preface it by saying that deal's more of the exception rather than the norm and more of a unicorn. Sure. Because the market was so good,
right.
We operated well. We kept occupancy high. I think we took really good care of the tenants. So that certainly helps too. But, somebody's lying to you if they told you that they created that much value in, a 3-year span. Sure. We just spent about $4,500 per door in renovations. So the market certainly helped us as well, because historically what we always look for and what the market kind of returns on these deals is between about 16 to 20% average annualized return. That deal did about 95% average annualized return on that one. So, we kind of 5x'd what is normal on that. And I'm always, transparent with people, because if they ask for our track record, I'll tell them, hey, look, the most recent deal we had that went full cycle and closed, the returns are abnormal on those. You might get excited about that. Those don't get that excited, because typically that deal that did 95% average annualized typically is going to be closer to about, 18% average annualized on those. So I think that's one of the things that we're dealing with now, is making sure that people do have proper expectations and don't expect something crazy like that. But that's the long story of how I went from
I feel like I have so many questions.
I know. I have
apartment
so many
complexes.
That is
how the first time that you had to run a pro forma and pitch it to people, you had to be so nervous that it was going to be inaccurate.
Yeah. So that's a good point and a good question that you asked. So, the first deal we ever did where we were raising equity for was that deal in Arizona. I always jokingly say that might be my first deal and my best deal ever in one, right? Which is usually not the case. It just happened to work out that way.
What a
But
story.
on that deal, what's interesting is that, a lot of this is just common sense. I think people oftentimes will overcomplicate things and they'll hesitate and they'll be fearful to just kind of jump in and get involved, right? So, and that was me for a while because I was investing in so many of these deals that I felt like I was ready, but I was kind of scared, honestly, because, you're asking people for money. You're asking for people to, put their trust in you in the form of not just verbal, but actual physical cold hard cash too.
Right.
And on that deal, I treated it as I treat like doing a CMA for clients, giving them an estimate of value on their home. I studied the comps. So I was out there. I call it secret shopping. That area, it was like B and C class property. So I'm not going dressed in like a suit and tie. I'm going in like mesh shorts, sneakers and a t-shirt. And I'm walking in there and saying, hey, I'm looking to move to this area. What do you guys have available as far as 1 and 2 bedrooms is concerned? And I would literally just have those leasing agents take me through their units. I would walk those units. And now I'd be able to compare to, what's the competition? What are they getting for rents? What is the property we're looking at getting for rents? Where can we take our rents to based on, what they're doing here? So I shopped that. The good thing about Arizona is the property taxes are so certain, and also insurances too, because they don't have big natural disasters out there. As
Yeah, that's true.
They don't have floods, they don't have tornadoes and stuff like that. It's dry heat. So their taxes, they have state laws on property taxes can't go, higher than like 5% per year in raise. So you don't have to worry about like kind of the variables there. All in all, the deal penciled really well. And I remember hitting up my partner on that deal, Brent, and saying, Brent, hey, I've always hesitated to kind of raise money, but call me crazy. I think we might have under embellished, how good we're going to do on this deal. And that's without considering like what the market wound up doing, because the market went nuts. But I thought we were super conservative in our estimates as far as like rent growth and all that kind of stuff, and pulled the trigger on it. We raised $3.5 million on that deal. And it was between 3 of us that was raising the money. And I remember going into that deal, because had we not been able to raise that money, we would have forfeited our earnest money deposit we put up front. That's just me.
Which
was how much?
$250,000. So yeah.
And how long did you have to raise that money?
So we had basically about 50 days to raise that money. And I felt that we would be able to, and we raised it rather quickly. Actually, we were able to raise it within like 2 weeks, which is nice because we didn't have that much pressure on us. But we raised that, kind of, let a breath out and said, oh, it worked. We got it. But then you buy the deal and you're like, well, now it's time to shine, right? It's time to operate. Right. So we were very fortunate to have a tremendous employee, Maria, on that property. She was probably the best property manager / leasing agent I've ever come across in my entire life. And she played a huge role in our success on that property. And our retention ratios were super high. Our occupancy was always 99% plus. Wait lists, as far as like when vacancies came up. So it worked out really well. And full cycle, I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better return. We could have asked for a better return had we, sold 6 months prior. We would have probably got a little bit more money, but it is what it is.
So how did you find that deal?
So really all those deals get listed with brokers. And
so it was actually for sale. You didn't like go find the owner of it?
Well, we actually, it's funny because I know the owners really well on that property as well. And that played a role. So those owners were a part of a mentorship group that we were a part of based out of Dallas. And they were doing all their deals in Dallas now, but this was their lone property they had in Phoenix. And they were like, we're looking to sell this. And they had first put it on the market and blasted it out to us as well. We looked at it. It looked good. And we decided to pursue it. So it was 2-part. Number one, we were on the brokers, what we call it distribution lists for like their deal flow. But number 2, we actually did know the owners. And that helps you because if you get into multiple bid situation in that space, what they care about a lot is your surety of closing. And one of the ways you do it if you're not experienced is you put up a lot of non-refundable earnest money deposit, which we put up about $250,000. So that says, hey, we're pretty sure we can close this. And if not, we're going to let you just have $250,000.
Right.
So
that's wild.
That definitely helps.
That's crazy.
All right. So let's go back to the people listening to this are probably the type of people who maybe would get invested in a syndication as an LP, a limited partner, and what would be the first step to get their name on a list or to get invited to a webinar, or what's the minimums? Like, I know I'm question stacking right now, but if I'm a total noob and I'm like, wow, this guy's cool that I'm listening to, his name's Kyle, how do I do what he does? Where does someone like that start?
Yeah, so I can tell you how I did it. So I told you earlier, I went to those events and I was basically just trying to find people to place my money with. So I would go to these different events throughout the country that were, geared towards syndicators. And I would just go and I'd go around the room and I would literally just ask people, hey, who's somebody that you recently invested with, who you had a good experience with, good returns, good communication, things like that. And I would also say other than yourself, because if you say, that, they just say, oh, ourself, right? So and once the same person's name kept popping up, I would then look for that person. And I would literally walk up to random people and be like, hey, did you see, let's say it's John Smith. Did you see John Smith? And they'd be like, no, we're not sure who John Smith is. Well, I'd go like another 20 feet away and ask another person, hey, have you seen John Smith by any chance? And eventually somebody knew the guy and they'd point him out to me, right? I go up to him, introduce myself, say, hey, I'm Kyle Kovats. Heard a lot about you. A lot of people speak really highly of you. I'd love to be put on your distribution list for, your deals that you're doing. I would have business card. Here's my business card. Do you have one on you as well? So I can get in touch with you to get on your list. They would usually have a website. I say, yeah, go to my website and click invest now, and then we'll put you on our distribution list. And that's how I'd get on those. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we run a company, Kovats Multifamily, and I'm certainly, happy to put people on our list as well. We have a website for that, kovatsmultifamily.com, where people can kind of do the same thing. But yeah, once you find people, usually you just go on their website, you click like a button that says like invest now or be added to our investor list and things like that. And then you get on their list. But furthermore, to take it a step further, like really the first way that I would start before even investing passively in a syndicate perhaps would be if somebody's more hands-on. And I know that there's people that are more hands-off, which was me after doing a lot of things hands-on, right? I like being hands-off. I like investing passively in the syndicate deals and stuff like that. But before doing that, if somebody likes being more hands-on, there's no better deal out there, in my opinion, than buying a 4-family house using an FHA loan, putting down 3.5%. Those are phenomenal. And now, obviously, to do that, it's got to be owner occupied. But when you think about that, the only thing I regret that I didn't do is, in hindsight, I wish my first ever purchase, instead of buying that little studio, was that I bought a 4-family. I used an FHA loan. I put 3.5% down. I lived in one unit and I rented out the other 3. And then after a year, I rent that one unit I'm living in. I rinse, repeat. I do it again. And all of a sudden, it's like, I just bought a 4-family with 3.5% down. And after I move out, it's going to be cash flow positive. I now have a 4-family where my monthly mortgage is covered, principal, interest, tax, and insurance. And now I'm buying another one, right? Yeah. I think that's like a true, they call it house hacking, right? But I think it's a true life hack to build wealth that way. I think it's a steal. I really think it's a steal.
I wish I would have
same thing.
I wish I would have been in that mindset 10 years ago when I started too.
Yep. And what's sad is like the interest rate was like 2.8.
I know, it's
got
insane.
Our first place. So I'm like, to think that we could have gotten a 4-plex.
Yeah.
Lived in one side.
Yeah.
It just makes me cringe.
I know.
It is.
So if you haven't owned real estate yet, and this is, an opportunity that aligns with your lifestyle right now, go for it, because it could be a game changer.
I think this is
the crazy way I always,
go ahead,
I was going to say the crazy way I always think about it is that historically, from 1870 to 2015, real estate appreciated at 6.61% a year. Now think about this for a second. If you put up 3.5% to buy that, if real estate just goes up by 3.5% a year, you have doubled your money in just a year. And that's if essentially the appreciation is half of what it normally is, which is really insane to think about. Just for round even number's sake, like if somebody bought a 4-family, I'm just using these numbers because they're rounded even, a 4-family for $1 million, and they put down $35,000 to buy it, 3.5%. If that goes up by, let's say, 6.61%, which is the historical norm, your $35,000 in equity is now about $100,000 in equity. You've now essentially turned $35,000 into $100,000 over the course of a year by literally doing nothing but sleeping. It's when you think about it, it's really just, it's insane and it's exciting when I think about that.
It's very exciting. It takes a certain person to find really deep excitement in this stuff, though.
Yeah.
Like maybe we're weird, but
where else can you go and get that much in your return? You know what I mean? Like you can't put it in the stock and get that.
The time invested, I think, is the biggest part.
Exactly.
Like, you can go, we can work for your money, or you can not work for your money.
Right.
Most people are going to choose the latter.
Mm-hmm.
The crazy thing I always say to people is that if you told somebody that, hey, look, buy 35,000 worth of this stock and you'll be able to sell it for 100,000 in, a year, they would tell you, they'd be like, okay, what's the catch? Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing about real estate is there's not a catch.
Right.
Right.
There's not a catch. And the stock, if it's $100 stock, you can buy it for $3.50.
Yeah. Which is nuts, which is insane.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say before I interrupted you last time, I was just going to say this is like a perfect little segue, and we'll go briefly on this. Kyle is known throughout our real estate community as the guy who has like the ultimate tax hacks. So we don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but Kyle, you haven't paid taxes in how long?
2017, federal
taxes since 2017. No, it's not a loophole. It's incentives the government gives you. And I just think it's amazing. You're the inspiration actually for me pushing out cost segregation studies so hard to my circle of people. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. But I'd like to hear some little tidbits on your tax strategy too. And I know you're not Brett Tanner says it best, right? Your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
This is not tax advice. Your situation is going to be different than ours.
Right. Yeah. So everybody's situation is different. And obviously I'm not, a licensed tax professional. So this is just from my perspective, I guess you could say my case study. But here's the funny thing. I had come across this 100% bonus depreciation when it got passed in the 2017 tax reform. And I was reading articles leading up to it being passed that, hey, this is going to come. This is what this means. And I posted a status on my Facebook page like, hey, is anybody familiar with this? I'm looking into this now, trying to kind of wrap my head around it and things like that. I said, what I kind of get is that if I'm like a real estate professional, I could take these deductions against my income. I'm not really sure, though. Does anybody have any knowledge on this? I got an enormous long reply from a kid who I played baseball with in high school. And he's a year younger than me. His name's Lee. He's now my current CPA. And he wrote this long response, and I kind of replied back. I said, hey, Lee, I said, if you don't mind me asking, how the hell do you know all of this? And he's like, well, I'm an accountant. He was like, this is literally all I specialize in. I specialize in real estate professional taxes. I said, well, that's great. I said, where's your office? I said, we need to meet. He gave me his office address. His office address was literally on the same exact street as my office, less than a mile away. So we met up, we went over everything. And he basically told me I was an idiot. He was like, you're an idiot. He was like, you've been paying this much in taxes for this long. He was like, are you even a halfway serious real estate professional? I said, well, I guess I'm not. So I said, he's like, I'm half kidding about that, but I'm really serious. But he was like, here's what we're going to do. And he laid out a whole plan for me. And the plan really was just invest in real estate. And he was like, invest in real estate. He's like, there's different ways you can invest in real estate, obviously. And I knew, obviously, 2 to 4 family and all these, different ways you can invest in real estate. He was like, but the whole gist of it is get active, invest in real estate, because either you're going to make a decision here. You're either going to pay the government a ton of money every single year in federal income taxes, or you can just do what they've incentivized you to do. And he recommended some books to me, like this book, Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright, which covers, the most recent tax code. And what that book starts off with, what he told me, and it says it in the book, 98% of the tax codes, about 6,500 pages, shows you how to pay less taxes. And that was an eye-opener to me. I said, well, I didn't know the tax code was literally a series of incentives. And that's how he explained it to me. So the tax code, just a series of incentives. He goes, if you really think about it, this country was formed because people were pissed off about paying taxes, right? With like the Boston Tea Party and all that. Yeah. He was like, so when the government started rolling out taxes in the early 1900s, they were afraid that they would literally basically get like tarred and feathered. So they were like, hold on, though. You don't have to pay taxes if you do these things. You only have to pay taxes if you do nothing to help us. And once I kind of changed my mindset in that regard and I started understanding that, I said, okay, I guess this makes sense. So there's all different, tax incentives out there, whether it be for things the government is trying to incentivize, like even things for like electric cars, renewable energy, things like that, and real estate, food production. So they always say countries need to provide two things to prevent people from revolting, and that's housing and shelter. Excuse me, shelter and food.
Mhm.
So they always highly incentivize, food, anything that creates food production, and shelter. So once I started understanding that, started investing in real estate, we'd have the cost segregation studies done that you mentioned previously. And these cost segregation studies, what it usually came out to roughly on the apartment complexes was that roughly about 30% of the purchase price was going to be tax deductible in year one of ownership by using 100% bonus depreciation. You'd hire a cost segregation company and engineers to come out, do a cost seg, analysis on the property, and they would spit back a report. If you do it, you want to do it the right way. You definitely want to hire licensed people to do it and not just do it yourself and say, I think it's about this much, because that's where you run into some trouble. So
Right.
we would do that. We'd get these reports back and see how much the deductions were. And it was like, whoa, that's an incredible deduction. Like we'll have a property that we bought for like, 50 million, and we might get a tax deduction back on that of like 15 million. And
Right.
it's like, whoa, it's a lot. So,
Mhm.
and then once you start seeing those deductions come in, and all of a sudden, like I'm doing in the process of doing my taxes right now, and around this time, mid-March, every single year is when you get your K1s back.
Yep.
I'm already in excess of $1.5 million in losses, which is really paper losses from depreciation. And those I just hand over to my accountant, Lee, and then he takes care of it. And, he puts them in and plugs them in, and it looks nice.
And you
I,
wait for the email. The
I
good
wait for the
news.
email
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
hopefully say, hey, you don't owe anything. Or, hey,
Right.
you have X amount of dollars to carry over to the next year.
Yeah.
Do you want a refund or do you want to carry it over?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
answer is
yeah,
always like,
exactly.
just carry it over.
Yep, just carry it. Just carry it.
Oh,
Gosh, that's
that's
so
great.
cool. All right, last thing we'll cover, because I know we're running out of time, is I unfollow a lot of people on social media because I don't really like to see what other people have to say. However, everything you post is so full of great information. I
Mhm.
always share it, or I copy it and paste it and give you credit. And so where I kind of want to go at the end here is get out your crystal ball. Let's talk maybe brief market stats, where things are headed. I'd love to hear your take on what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're in a really low inventory environment really for the rest of the decade, personally. And I don't say this because I base it on the stats that are out there, right? So, when you look at the stats, the past few years, we hit such a big refi wave, number one, right? So rates were so low for so long that it's hard to find many people out there that didn't refinance and don't have super low rates.
I think
The average nation,
I think I heard a stat the other day that was like 70% of homeowners have a rate under like 3.5.
yeah, so the 73%, I know that. So based on the stats that I've seen out there, depending upon what the source is, between 63 and 73% of homeowners who have a mortgage on their home, because 40% of homeowners don't even have a mortgage to begin with. But
Right.
63 to 73% of people who actually have mortgages on their home have a rate below 4%. And the average nationwide mortgage rate right now is 3.47% directly off the US government's website. So when you think about that, and here's a crazy stat that I was, kind of running. So the Case-Shiller Index studies home prices, home price appreciation, or depreciation, depending upon what time frame you're in. From 2018 until now, the Case-Shiller Index for nationwide home prices has gone up by 50%, which means if you bought a home in 2018 for 500 grand, it's worth 750 now. That's number one. Number two, the average nationwide mortgage rate is 3.47%. So that person who bought their home for, let's say $500,000 in 2018, and let's say they put down 100 grand, they had a mortgage balance of $400,000 at a 3.47% rate, which implies a monthly payment of roughly about $1,800. Now, that same exact home today, to buy that same exact home today, it would cost them $750, and average nationwide mortgage rate right now is about 6.7-ish%. That would imply a monthly payment of more than double that, of closer to $4,000 a month. So that same person to buy their same exact house now cost them about more than double per month in just principal and interest. And your traditional move-up buyer on average buys a house worth 50% more than their current home, which would imply that that $750,000 homeowner would be buying a house for $1.125 million, which if they put down 20% would imply a monthly payment that's nearly $5,000 more than their current house. So whether those people want to be move-up buyers or not, they are just deciding that, hey, my monthly living expense is so low that if I want to buy that next level house, it's going to skyrocket so much that I'm just going to stay in place. And we're seeing this because if you look at the listings data, Logan Motoshami puts this out. He's with Housing Wire, tremendous resource. He's a free follow on Twitter. I follow him on Twitter. He's phenomenal. He engages with people. He answers your questions and things like that. Really, really good. And they have a great service too. What the stats are showing as far as total new listing volume? Total new listing volume this week is about 20,000 homes less per week than just last year. And it's even more when you go back years prior. Because this year, right now, we have the second lowest inventory of all time. The lowest of all time was last year. But the inventory growth right now is not because more people listing their homes. The least amount of population adjusted, we have the least amount of people ever right now listing their homes for sale, ever. So people are just, whether you want to call it a rate lock because the rates are so low or a payment lock because their monthly payments are so low, whatever you want to call it, so few people are actually listing their homes for sale that when you have inventory crunched so tight, when you pair that with we have the most 30 to 35-year-olds ever in United States history right now, which is peak household formation age, you have a crazy, crazy demand, but really, really low supply. So there was certainly a demand hit when the rates went up. However, there was also, really a supply hit. New listings fell off a cliff. And, along with that, when you have such low supply, even if demand goes lower, if it does not go lower than supply, you're going to be in a pretty steady market. I know there's people out there that are like, well, what if this happens, this happens, this happens, this all can tank. Well, catastrophic things would have to really happen, for things to tank, because housing really is just the cost of shelter. People need housing, whether you're in good economic times, bad economic times, people need shelter. So, and when you have, again, the most amount of 30 to 35-year-olds ever in country history, and the millennial generation is the largest generation ever, and they're all at peak household formation age right now, it's really a positive thing for homeowners as far as keeping their rates, keeping their prices and home values steady. It's unfortunately making things more challenging for buyers. But I would say if you're a buyer out there looking to buy, if you're just like, I'm going to wait and, hope the market tanks, I wouldn't hold your breath, because that doesn't look like it's happening. Could you see some price corrections? Yeah, you could see, minimal price corrections. But end of the day, if the price is correct by, I'm using like nationwide average numbers, but let's say like 3 to 5%, well, those extra 2 to 3 years of you renting, you would have paid your mortgage balance down by more than 3 to 5%. So, you might as well, as they say right now, and I hate the cliche, but it really is true. What do they say? Date the rate and buy the house, or marry the house. Yeah. So it really is true, though.
I can't stand that either, but it's true. And another part of that is, how long are you willing to sacrifice your happiness or the home that you need to function as a family? If you're growing and you're in between the ages of 30 and 35, another kid in your current home may not be possible, but you're willing to wait it out a year to see if the market changes. How painful is that 365 days for your family? Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. I know I would go crazy, and a couple $1,000 here and there is a no-brainer, because it just puts my family in a better place. So you just have to weigh out the pros and cons to each scenario, and everyone's different. We're also seeing a huge new construction, like housing boom in our area. There's so many new developments that are popping up, which is needed, because in the 08, 07, I mean, that was down. They weren't building homes, so we have to catch up. So a lot.
We have a housing shortage nationwide. Depending upon where you look, the median number they typically show is 5 million. We're short by about 5 million homes. And now there was so much construction in the pipeline built up that got slowed down because of COVID in the background, kind of the backlogs and, supply chain issues, labor issues, and they're finishing what they started now, but new permits getting pulled, those are falling off a cliff, because when rates go up, builders are like, we're going to finish up building what we still have to build. We're not going to apply for any new permits yet. Right. We're going to wait until we finish those up and we sell those off. So we went from finally supply starting to get close to catching up to all of a sudden bang, right? So, we can't win there.
I've even been thinking about, some of these builders have specs that have been sitting around. I'm like, that would be a good investment property. If the price is right, go buy a brand new house, 5-bedroom in a good school district.
Yeah, if the price is right, there's never a bad time to buy.
That's what I tell everybody. I'm like, it's a numbers game.
Yep.
If the numbers work, then it's a good buy. If they don't, it's not. It's simple.
Yeah.
So how many people do we know that 3 or 4 years ago passed up on opportunities because the market was inflated? I mean, I remember being at a men's league hockey game and some guy was like, "Oh, I'll never buy this year. It's crazy." This was like 2016. I'm like, I wish I could find that guy right now and be like, did you buy or no?
Yeah. He would have made a lot of money had he bought.
Yeah.
Right.
Seriously.
Cool. Well, I don't have anything else. Karissa, do you have any other questions? Cool.
No.
Thank you, Kyle, for your time. Appreciate you.
It's so fun hearing your accent. I used to work for a company in Swedesboro.
Oh yeah.
And so all my Zooms and phone calls were just like fast-paced, heavy accents. And then you kind of take it for granted because I appreciate those quick conversations. You get a lot across in a short amount of time. And now I'm back to like Midwestern talk, which is still pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a Rangers fan or are you a Devils fan?
I'm a big Rangers fan. I'm actually going to the game tonight against the Canes
really?
at the Garden. Yeah. I go to like 15, 20 games a year. I don't have season tickets, but awesome. I might as well get half season tickets because I live literally 10 minutes from the Garden. So I can leave my apartment right now and I'd be inside the Garden within 20 minutes.
And where are you about right now?
I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Okay, so still there. Okay,
did you get a Patrick Kane jersey yet?
Not yet, but I'm kind of leaning towards I want a Tarasenko jersey. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's pretty awesome. Dude, playoffs are gonna be amazing, and the Eastern Conference is ridiculous.
The Eastern Conference is so an absolute crazy. It is loaded. It is so the way the playoffs work, we either are going to play the Canes or the Devils in the first round. I'm hoping it's the Devils. That would be wonderful because then I could go to every single game.
How fun would that be?
Yeah, I live like so. We have this thing called the Path, which is like our subway here. So the Path goes to both Prudential Center, which is where the Devils play, and the Garden. So and I live like a 5-minute walk from it. So I could public transportation. The areas surrounding both are pretty fun too. Well, obviously the city is the city. You could stop anywhere and just get right back on and go there. But at the Devils Arena, Prudential Center, they're surrounded by all these like cool little bars and like, so it's fun. Yeah. So we'll have a great time either way.
It's gonna be
we're
so
diehard Minnesota Wild fans. So hopefully we can get some.
The Wild play the Devils tonight, actually.
Yeah,
they do tonight. Yeah.
So Ezra, our son, he's obsessed with hockey. He's actually a Pittsburgh fan, Penguin fan.
Really?
So we went to Pittsburgh to watch the Penguins play the Bruins, which was amazing. We left that trip and I said, you know what's wrong with Minnesota Wild fans is they have zero tenacity. Like sitting in that arena and like a
bunch of really nice people.
It was a really good game. It was in the beginning of the season, but it was a really good game. People were on their feet cheering like the entire third period. I'm like, why don't we have this in the state of hockey where everyone's like just casually sipping on their beer and eating popcorn like they're at the movies? Like this.
I always credit that we know too much. We're such a hockey community that we sit back and we watch the game, whereas like other communities just like want to throw stuff on the ice. And
I went to the
great environment.
It's phenomenal. I went to the Rangers Bruins game 2 weekends ago in Boston. And we took the train up there and I was wearing a Adam Fox jersey and I was taking it. So yeah, they were giving it to me. So awesome. It was Rangers lost 4-2. Once it got to 4-1, the Bruins scored in the third to make it 4-1, but everybody stands up to cheer. I say to my girlfriend, I'm like, let's get out of here. This is a good time to leave. And as we're leaving, they're like, yeah, fuck you. Like, get the fuck, their accent's horrible. It's like, get the fuck out. And we're just like, all right. I was like, let's go.
Yeah, and they're good. They'll be fun to watch in the playoffs.
They're phenomenal.
They're so
it's going to be great seeing them. I think obviously they'll wind up playing either Toronto or the Lightning in the second round. And that's going to be a great series. I hope somebody takes them down. Yeah,
I can't wait.
Except our friend Charlie plays for the Bruins, and I would love to see him win a cup.
That'd be pretty cool.
Especially in his home state. That would be a really cool story.
Yeah,
for him, so
that'd be cool.
Well, we hope to see you soon. You're gonna be at Mega Camp?
August, right?
Yep.
Or is August? Yeah, I haven't booked it yet, but yeah, I should be able to make it this year.
Book it.
I don't think I have much going on. When in August is it?
Like mid month, I think, right? Mid to
third
week, maybe.
If it's third week, I'll be there. I'm going to be in Italy from August 10th to the 20th. So as long as it's not in that time frame, then I'll likely be there.
Yeah, I think it's after that because
Sounds
it
good.
usually interferes with a lot of people and their kids starting school.
Right.
So I think it's the 3rd.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll
We'll
pull
see.
it
man.
up. I'm sure I'll
Cool.
be able to
We'll hope
find
to see you
it.
soon. Thank you for doing
Yeah.
this. Appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
Likewise.
See you,
And
Kyle.
go Minnesota tonight because we want to catch the Devils.
Yes.
We're 5
Yeah.
points behind
Yes.
them. And I
Go
love
Wild.
I love
Wow.
Zuccarello.
Yeah.
All right. See you, Kyle.
All right. I'll see you
Bye.
guys. Bye.